breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison. How's it going, bud?
Doing great. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kolby?
Good. It's been about a week.
It has been. It's been about a week. Lots going on. You had a little one that was sick.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a cough. The
little one.
Yeah, yep. It's so hard with them because, you're like, oh, is he sick? He's got a runny nose. Is he cutting teeth? He doesn't have a feet. There's so many things you're always questioning.
There's no consistencies at that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he had a cough 7 seconds ago, but now I haven't, you haven't heard it in 12 hours, but he had one 7 seconds,
everything
yesterday.
everything is growing and stretching and there's teeth coming out of it. So it's like, what do you do?
Everything's amplified because you're all paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yeah,
right.
we kept him home today. It was more preventative. I think we didn't want to be the parents that sent their kid to daycare when he may have been sick. So
yeah, because you get labeled.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get
sure. There's other kids there too.
Oh, well, and I get so mad when people bring their kids to daycare and they're like, yeah, they had a fever this weekend, but we gave them a bunch of Tylenol and sent them to daycare. No, don't do that. Like, now my kid's gonna be sick. So,
That's right. They maybe weren't being compliant with the system.
That's right. They were not being compliant. It says right in the rules, don't give your kid Tylenol to suppress the fever. Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so that leads us to this week's topic, which is why is 100% compliance imperative when working through a chronic illness? If this is your first time watching or listening and you get value out of this content, please hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications because we're going to continue to roll out new content each and every week. And hopefully we roll out something that's applicable to you. So why don't you start? Why is compliance so important, especially when you're dealing with something like a chronic illness?
I think the chronic word is the key here because when something's chronic, it just takes so long for to see an outcome, and versus an acute condition where it's a flare or it's an episode of something, and then it's severe, and then you're aware of it, and you try to fix it, and then you get to the other side. But chronic illness is another beast. It could be going on 6 months to 60 or 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So any changes that are done, any applications have to be 100% compliance to have an outcome, and it's hard to do. Really, it's hard to do. So I guess that's the difference, because it's chronic that we're focusing on chronic.
Yeah, and here's the thing with. I think we've actually talked about this in a previous podcast. The further you get away from a point, the harder it is to get back to it, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a chronic issue and you're having, it's been going on for a long, long time, then obviously you can't make half concerted efforts to change something and expect a dramatic change. It's just not going to work. If you're going to do something, you need to be really dedicated and diligent and make sure you commit completely, because then you can and say it doesn't work, right? At least then this does not work. We got to go a different avenue. If you only, kind of put a half-hearted effort into it, then you don't really know if it's going to work or not.
That's right. A lot of dealing with these chronic conditions, there's no one size that fits all. And it's not like, okay, this is what we need to do. Sometimes we got to rule out things. And I tell patients this, maybe you do all the time, like, okay, you're on your own now. And for our outcomes, you need to follow this 100% to a T. We have to know if this is going to work or not work. Mm-hmm. And we can't do it part way or kind of do it, and then we rule it out and say that didn't work, because we could miss keys to unlocking some of these health issues. So follow it 100%, and then we'll know for certain if it's going to help or if it's not going to help. So I think that's another reason why chronic, consistency and compliance is required to overcome. And work.
I always tell my patients that one of three things can happen, right? You're either going to get better, you're going to get worse, or you're going to stay the same. But you don't really know unless we're completely compliant. So if you get better, great. Then we picked the right thing. If you got worse, great. That tells you something. And if you didn't get, if nothing happened, well, then maybe you picked the wrong thing or you didn't do enough of the right thing. But you don't know unless you were 100% compliant.
That's right. And this whole compliance thing, there's so much involved to it, and it's not always the easiest. Why is compliance so difficult in some situations?
I think that part of it's probably, how well do you communicate with your provider, I guess is a good way to say it. Do you know why you're doing something? Has it been communicated with you? Like, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. This is why we're going to do it. Yeah. This is how long we're going to do it. You don't have a roadmap. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a big part of it. I think that maybe, especially with chronic illness, you've probably seen other people with it. There's probably a general lack of trust in general for practitioners. So maybe you don't have someone that you can trust. So maybe establishing that doctor-patient relationship and determining, like, is this going to be a good fit? Is this someone that you can see yourself, that you are confident in, that you feel like they have a very linear plan, that they feel like they've seen this stuff before? So your confidence in your provider, and then a very clear, concise roadmap to how you're going to get to where you want to go, I think is the biggest part.
For sure. And setting expectations. So not only a roadmap, but I guess part of the expectations are the roadmap. What to look for, what expected outcomes are normal or not normal, or satisfactory or not satisfactory, setting the parameters so people can kind of navigate through it. And I think when we know where we're going or we know what we're doing, it's easier to follow or be compliant versus this random kind of floating through the abyss of trying to get from point A to point B.
Right.
So having a target and then having a path. It's not always the easiest. I know early in my practice, it was hard, and it still is hard to set a roadmap for some of these things, because there's literally, half a dozen things going on in the body, and you're trying to put the connections together and set the trajectory so everybody knows what they're doing at any given time.
Well, and the hardest part is, especially with chronic conditions, when you're trying to address something that's maybe been an issue for years, right, is you really don't know how someone's going to respond. Someone might respond beautifully and you're like, perfect, that's how we want to see it. Keep doing what you're doing. Then there might be someone that you mess just a little bit too much with their physiology and they crash, and then they get worse.
Yeah.
And then, so it's this like constant tinkering process. But being able to communicate with your doctor, what's going on, what's happening, and then have them be able to take the time to implement that kind of stuff, that's really imperative.
And what can patients do in this regard? We're talking about the doctor and setting a roadmap and a path, and the doctor and the patient forming a relationship so they can have the conversation to get involved in their care, right? That's the active care versus the passive care. Passive care kind of works with infections and broken bones, where the patient doesn't do anything. This is doctor fix me, fuse my bone and stitch me up and give me the antibiotics, and I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. The passive care is really where the chronic illness comes, where you have to be involved in your care. The stitches and the antibiotics don't work for chronic illness. So when we are being involved in our care, what are some of the things? What's another thing maybe that the patient can do to navigate through it or help the process?
Yeah. So I feel like if you don't understand or you have questions, then you need to ask those questions. Why am I doing this? To not be scared to ask questions.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like, it's going to be a really, personal relationship you develop with your practitioner, especially when you're doing stuff like this, because you have to be comfortable asking those uncomfortable questions, or, no one wants to feel, dumb, or they don't want to feel uninformed or whatever. But if you don't understand why you're doing something, then you need to ask that question. If you're like, well, at what, or even if it's an interval, at what interval should I do this? Then you need to ask that. And a lot of times I think that providers especially are so used to using like big medical jargon that they're like, we're going to do this and this and this. And you're like, I didn't go to medical school, or I didn't go to chiropractic school, or I'm not a nurse or whatever. Can you dumb it down a little bit? That's okay too, because you have to understand, if you don't understand why you're doing something or how this is going to apply to your care, then the likelihood of you following through and doing it goes down. That's just the nature of the beast. Like, if you don't understand why you're doing it or what you're working towards, then the likelihood that you follow through and do what you what they're recommending drops dramatically. So if you don't understand what you're doing and they give you an answer you don't understand, well, then ask them to break it down a little bit.
That's right. So I guess to simplify, to summarize, a patient can make sure that they ask questions and not accept something when they don't understand it.
Right.
Naturally, it takes the provider, the doctor, to be able to set up a space where people feel comfortable asking those questions. So I guess it works both ways, because I want to say I've been tricked, but maybe it's kind of been a trick. I always say, does that make sense? Does that make sense? And who knows, maybe I'm moving through things sometimes quicker than I should be. Maybe it was partly my issue at fault, and maybe it's partly their fault, where, I get an email after the appointment or the next day, I kind of didn't understand what you're talking about. I'm like, whoa, thought it was clear. And
to you were probably clear, right?
Yeah. And who knows, I am dealing with people, and I know you are, that are not there. They don't have the cognitive performance. Their brains are not working. There's a lot of brain fog. They're having a hard time to concentrate. And I'm going to start talking to them about these maybe more complicated scenarios and explaining a health condition where they have a hard time to do anything for 20, 30 minutes. So there could have been some of that as well. But the most important thing is that patient did email me and say, yeah, I kind of lost you there.
Got a couple questions.
Yeah. Can we revisit that? Of course, because if they don't know what the heck they're doing or why they're doing it or what my intention is so they can be part of the team, it's not going to work out. So of course, the patient should be able to ask questions. It should be an environment to ask questions and do everything they can to understand what's going on and be part of their care, be active in their care versus a passive patient.
Absolutely.
I don't know how much farther to go with this when it comes to compliance. I think it was important to have the conversation and maybe the emphasis on people listening to this podcast. They're looking for health solutions, and they're probably struggling with something chronic. And I think we really wanted to break down why compliance is a necessary tool to navigate through chronic illness.
I like how you said that. It is a tool. It really is. Nothing easy was ever gained overnight, and it's going to be difficult most likely, but for you to know that it's going to work or not work, you have to be 100% invested. And at least then if it doesn't work, you know. And then you can say this didn't work, and I can definitively say it didn't work because
I kind of don't think it don't think it worked. I don't know.
Maybe it worked a little bit. I'm not really sure. I only did it like maybe 3/4 of the time.
Because then if you tell that to the doctor or me or you or whoever your doctor is, they'll be like, because I've had this and I know you've had it. You're like, wow, damn, I don't want to abandon that yet. I'm not persuaded that door is closed yet. So let's push on with this. Well, what happens? Patient's like, oh, this sucks. And then the doctor's like,
get burned out, right? They don't want to do it either.
And then the doctor's like, this sucks because we got to keep going with that and we can't close
right.
that.
Whereas if you walk in and you're like, hey, Dr. Glenn, hey, Dr. Kolby, I did this like 100% to a T and none of it worked. I'd be like, okay, time to move on.
That's right. So
well, we hope you got value out of this one. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or topics you'd like us to cover, you can get a hold of us at info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. You can find a lot of information on our websites. Mine is northlakeschiropractic.com. Dr. Glenn's is drgharrison.com. And again, turn on notifications, hit like and subscribe because we're going to continue to roll out new content each and every week.
That's right. Look forward to the next one, Dr. Kolby.
Yeah. All right, bud. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.